Jimin wakes up furious after a violent argument. Jungkook freezes as secrets threaten to erupt. What happened before the fight? And what will happen now? "Don't touch me." The hiss of rage that broke the sterile silence of the hospital room cut through Jungkook like a blade. He stopped mid-step, one foot still hanging off the linoleum floor, his hand trembling inches from Jimin's hospital bed. Jimin was awake, and he was furious. His chest heaved under the crisp white blanket, sweat-dampened hair clinging to his forehead, his eyes sharp, glinting like shattered glass in the dim overhead light. The IV line tugged at his wrist as he sat upright abruptly, yanking his arm with more strength than anyone thought he had left. Jungkook didn't move, couldn't. His body refused to obey him as his gaze locked with Jimin's, eyes that used to hold trust, warmth, laughter. Now they only burned with betrayal. The room was still except for the distant hum of a heart monitor and the rhythmic tick of a clock that seemed louder than it should be. Outside, muffled footsteps passed by the glass door, unaware of the emotional wreckage unfolding within. Jimin's voice was low, like a growl buried beneath clenched teeth. "Where were you when it mattered?" Jungkook opened his mouth, but no sound came. He had rehearsed 1,000 apologies in his head during the last 36 hours. None of them fit now. None could cross the chasm that opened between them since the fight. "I asked you to be there," Jimin said, his hands fisting the bedsheets. "One time, Jungkook, one time I needed you." Jungkook's throat tightened. The memory crashed back, the screaming, the fists slamming into lockers, the blur of red and panic and sirens. He hadn't been fast enough. He had let it go too far. He had said things he couldn't take back. "I tried to fix it," Jungkook finally managed, voice brittle. "Too late," Jimin snapped. "You chose sides." "No," Jungkook's hand instinctively reached forward again, but Jimin flinched. "I wasn't choosing anyone. I panicked. You don't understand what was happening in my head." Jimin's laugh was cold and hollow. "Of course I don't. You never let me in." There was no screaming now, no wild gestures, just pain, so quiet it suffocated everything else. Jungkook looked at the boy in front of him, not the performer, not the global icon, but the friend who once sat beside him in the trainee dorm at 2 a.m., sharing a cup of ramen and dreams. That boy was slipping through his fingers like smoke. Behind them, the door creaked open. Taehyung peeked in, concern etched deep into his brow, his hand still holding the edge of the frame. He didn't speak. He just looked from Jimin to Jungkook and then quietly closed the door again. Silence returned. Jungkook pulled a chair beside the bed but didn't sit. He crouched instead, eye level with Jimin, trying to close the distance, physically, emotionally, anything. "I know you don't want to hear this right now, but I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry you say just to be forgiven. I mean, I hate myself for what happened." Jimin turned his face to the side, his jaw tightened. "I thought I could protect everyone," Jungkook whispered. "Instead, I broke everything." "You didn't break everything," Jimin said finally, so quiet it was almost a breath. "Just me." The weight of those words knocked the air from Jungkook's lungs. He didn't even notice the tears until one fell on the back of his hand. He wiped it away roughly, angry at himself for losing control now when he should be strong, when Jimin needed strength, not more of his guilt. But then something shifted. Jimin didn't yell again. He just sat there staring at the wall, his fury cooling into something darker. Resentment, disappointment, hurt that had soaked too deep to bleed anymore. Jungkook needed to find a way back, but the path had vanished. Burned in the fire of everything they didn't say before it was too late. "I'm staying," Jungkook said, more to himself than to Jimin. "You don't have to forgive me, just don't shut me out completely." Jimin didn't answer. Outside the room, Namjoon leaned against the wall, arms folded, listening. He knew something had broken between the two of them long before the fight, long before the hospital. The fracture wasn't sudden, it was a slow erosion. Words unsaid, tensions ignored, 1,000 tiny cuts that became one deep wound. Inside, Jungkook finally sat. His fingers gripped the edge of the bed frame, knuckles white. "You once said we were brothers," he said, voice shaking. "You meant it then, right?" Jimin's eyes flicked toward him, unreadable. Then he looked away again. "Don't call me that now," Jimin said. And that was worse than any silence. But he didn't ask Jungkook to leave. He didn't throw him out. That somehow was the only mercy left in the wreckage. The door slammed so hard the sound ricocheted down the hospital hallway like a gunshot. Namjoon stepped back just in time to avoid it hitting him in the face, but the sudden movement jolted the coffee cup from his hand. It splashed across the sterile floor in a streak of brown before he could curse under his breath. Inside the room, Jungkook was already on his feet, chest rising and falling like he just sprinted through a hurricane. Jimin sat rigidly on the bed, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. The silence between them was no longer cold, it was radioactive. "You need to leave," Jimin growled. "Now." Jungkook didn't budge. His voice, when it finally came, was sharp but quiet, like the edge of a blade pressed too gently against skin. "I'm not going anywhere." Jimin's head tilted, eyes narrowing. "What are you hopping for? Redemption? A pat on the back because you finally showed up?" Jungkook's throat flexed as he swallowed something hard, something that tasted like regret, failure, and unresolved rage. "I didn't show up to be forgiven. I showed up because I still care." Jimin's eyes burned with disbelief. "Care? You care now? After you stood there and watched me be dragged into that fight alone? After you let them twist everything, make me the villain?" "I didn't let anything happen," Jungkook shouted, the walls shaking with the force of his voice. "You think I stood there and smiled while you got hurt? I was trying to stop it." "Trying?" Jimin's voice cracked as he laughed bitterly. "Trying isn't enough when people you love are bleeding, Jungkook." The word hung in the air like a haunting echo. "Love." Jungkook stepped forward instinctively, his voice dropping. "You think I didn't feel every punch like it landed on me?" Jimin scoffed. "Oh, so now we're connected psychically, that's cute." Jungkook's face contorted. He wasn't sure if it was from pain, humiliation, or fury. "You're twisting this. You know I didn't want it to go that far." "But it did," Jimin said slowly, coldly. "And you didn't stop it. You chose silence over loyalty." The door opened again. This time Hoseok entered, his usually bright expression carved into something unreadable. "Is this really how we're doing this now?" Hoseok asked, voice quiet but loaded. "Fighting in a hospital room while the media's already outside drooling for blood." "Let them watch," Jimin snapped, eyes still locked on Jungkook. "Maybe they'll finally understand who he really is." "That's enough," Hoseok said sharply, stepping between them. "Both of you." But neither moved. Jungkook was trembling not from fear, but from the emotional chaos storming behind his ribcage. "You're hurt and you're angry, I get that. I deserve it, but don't pretend like I meant to betray you." "You didn't have to mean it," Jimin said low. "You just did." Hoseok looked from one to the other, reading more than words. "What happened that night?" he asked carefully. "Wasn't just about the fight, was it?" Jimin blinked. Jungkook's breath caught. The silence was answer enough. Outside the room, Taehyung was packing. He hadn't said much to anyone since Jimin was brought in. He'd been the one who found him, hunched in the stairwell of the venue, bloody and dazed. He had carried Jimin into the van himself, hands shaking, shirt soaked red. Now every time someone walked past the door, Taehyung flinched. He wasn't scared of the fight. He was scared of the truth that might come out of it. Back inside, Hoseok rubbed his temples. "Whatever the hell is going on between you two, it's bigger than that night." Jungkook finally whispered, "You don't know the half of it." Jimin turned his face away. "And you never will." Hoseok took a breath. "Then maybe you should start talking, both of you." But Jimin laughed again, bitterly. "What's the point? The moment we open our mouths, we become headlines, scandals, weapons for fan wars." "And if you don't," Hoseok said, leveling his gaze at them. You become ghosts. The quiet that followed was more terrifying than the shouting, because in it lived everything unspoken, the unresolved pain, the misplaced trust, the years of friendship twisted by fame and fear. Then, almost in a whisper, Jimin said, "You don't know what it feels like to be erased." "I do," Jungkook said, barely audible, "because I erased myself to protect you." Jimin looked at him sharply. "You think I was being selfish that night," Jungkook said, voice thick. "I was scared, not for me, for you, for what they were going to do to you if I didn't say something they could accept." "Who's they?" Hoseok demanded. Jungkook hesitated. Jimin narrowed his eyes. "You mean management?" Jungkook's silence was the only confirmation needed. Jimin's laugh this time was more like a sob. "You let HYBE decide what I was worth to you." "No," Jungkook snapped. "I let them decide what I could risk, because they made it clear if I took your side, they'd bury both of us." "And you didn't think I was worth being buried with?" Jimin asked, every word laced with venom. "I thought one of us needed to survive," Jungkook said. Hoseok sat down slowly, stunned. "You made a deal." "I made a choice," Jungkook corrected. "A terrible, gut-wrenching, soul-breaking choice." "Behind my back," Jimin said. Jungkook's eyes were bloodshot, "because I knew you'd never agree to it." The tension twisted so tight, it felt like the walls themselves might collapse. And then Jimin broke. "You lied," he whispered, a single tear cutting down his cheek. "You lied to protect me, and you ended up destroying everything anyway." Jungkook nodded, voice like sandpaper. "I know." For the first time, Jimin's shoulders sagged. The anger wasn't gone, but it was exhausted, like it had burned too hot for too long, and now all that was left was ash. The door creaked open again. This time it was Seokjin. And behind him, Yoongi. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. Because all of them knew. Something irreversible had happened. Something bigger than a fight. Something deeper than betrayal. A fracture at the foundation of who they were. And now the world outside, press, fans, the entire K-pop industry, was watching closely, waiting for the cracks to spread. Taehyung finally entered the room too. He walked over to Jimin and silently set down the jacket he'd been holding for hours. Jimin didn't look at him. But Taehyung placed a gentle hand on Jimin's shoulder. "Don't let this be the last word," he said. And for the first time since waking, Jimin closed his eyes and said nothing at all. Jungkook stood frozen again, but not from fear. This time, it was because he realized something far worse. No apology would ever be enough to undo what had already shattered. And yet he would stay, not to be forgiven, but to prove that maybe, just maybe, not everything was beyond repair. "You should have let me die that night." The words sliced through the room like a shard of glass. No one moved, not even the machines. Jimin didn't look at Jungkook when he said it. He stared at the ceiling, voice low, empty. He wasn't trying to shock anyone. He was just done pretending. Jungkook blinked once, then again harder, like his brain was fighting the sound. Hoseok, standing by the window, turned around so slowly it was as if the air itself had thickened. Taehyung, who had just walked back in with a bottle of water for Jimin, stopped in his tracks. His knuckles whitened around the cap. "You don't mean that," Jungkook said, barely breathing. Jimin chuckled. It was hollow, ugly, a sound born from too many nights pretending everything was fine when it was breaking. "You think I do. You're just angry," Hoseok stepped in, trying to recalibrate the storm before it exploded again. "You're in pain, emotionally, physically." "No," Jimin finally looked at him. "This isn't a moment of emotional overdrive, Haeyoung. This is me being honest for once." Jungkook's heart pounded so loud it filled his ears. "Then be honest with me, not with the ceiling." Jimin turned to him, eyes bloodshot. "You want honesty, all right." Jungkook braced for impact. You abandoned me, Jimin said. You watched me fall. You didn't raise a hand when they turned on me backstage. You didn't stop them when they said I was too emotional, when they called me a risk to the brand. You knew I was spiraling, and you let me drown alone. Jungkook's fists clenched at his sides. I tried. No, you didn't, Jimin's voice cracked. You hesitated, and in hesitation, you chose them over me. Taehyung stepped forward, voice quiet but tense. He didn't choose. Jimin shot him a look. Don't defend him, not after what you saw. Taehyung's mouth opened, then shut again. He looked at the floor. Jungkook was shaking, not with fear, but with the violence of everything he'd buried. You think I'm proud of what I did that night? You think I sleep peacefully knowing I stood there frozen while you were dragged into that room alone? Jimin said nothing. Jungkook stepped forward, desperate now. Do you want to know what they threatened me with? Do you want to hear the real reason I didn't fight back? Hosak's eyebrows drew together slowly. What are you saying? Jungkook exhaled like a man about to jump off a cliff. HYBE gave me a choice. Either I kept my mouth shut about what happened backstage, or they would leak the footage of what Jimin said during rehearsals 2 nights before the concert. Jimin's body went rigid. What footage? Taehyung asked, eyes narrowing. Jungkook looked at him, then back at Jimin. The one where he broke down in the vocal room, where he said he wanted to quit, that he couldn't take the pressure anymore, that he wished he could just disappear. Taehyung stepped back like he'd been slapped. Jimin's voice was dry. You knew they were recording. I didn't know until they played it for me, Jungkook said. They cornered me, said if I spoke out they'd release it to the media, frame you as unstable, a liability, said it would kill your career, said it might even cost you your life if the fans turned on you. And you believed them, Jimin spat. I believed you, Jungkook said. I believed you were hanging on by a thread, that if they pushed, you fall. So I let them use me to protect you, and I've hated myself for it ever since. The room felt colder. The hospital lights buzzed overhead like they were trying to fill the silence. Jimin looked shattered. You should have told me. And then what? Jungkook asked. You insist on exposing the truth and take the hit yourself. You would have done it, I know you would, but I couldn't let that happen. So you decided for me, Jimin said, voice rising. You decided what I could handle, what I deserved to know. I decided to keep you alive. No, Jimin said, eyes glowing. You decided to keep yourself innocent in your own head. Hosak exhaled heavily and finally sat down, burying his face in his hands. We're a mess. Worse, Taehyung whispered, we're broken. But Jimin wasn't finished. You think keeping secrets protects people? It kills them. I sat in this hospital for 2 days thinking I was crazy, thinking you didn't care, thinking maybe the world was right, that I was a problem. Don't say that, Jungkook said, his voice cracking. You let me believe I was alone, Jimin said, and I believed it so deeply I didn't care if I ever woke up. Taehyung couldn't hold it in anymore. Stop it, both of you. They all turned to him. You think you're the only ones bleeding? Taehyung asked. We all bled that night. We all carry pieces of the wreckage, and if you keep cutting each other with it, there'll be nothing left of us. There was silence. Then the door opened again. Yoongi. He didn't speak, just handed a folded piece of paper to Jimin. Jimin unfolded it slowly. It was a transcript. His words, his breakdown, word for word. Where did you get this? Jimin asked, voice trembling. Yoongi's expression was grim. It was emailed to me from an anonymous account. This morning, someone wanted it to leak. Jimin's hand trembled as he read, so it was all real. They recorded you, Yoongi confirmed, illegally, and they were prepared to use it. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Jungkook asked. Because I needed proof before I accused anyone, Yoongi said, and because I knew if I told you, you'd burn the whole company down to protect him. Again. Hosak stood, so now what? Now we fight back, Yoongi said. No, Jimin said firmly. I fight back. No more silence. No more protecting people who think they can own me. You don't have to do it alone, Jungkook said. Jimin looked at him. For the first time, the anger in his eyes softened, just a little. Then don't leave my side again, he said. And Jungkook, with no hesitation, nodded. Never again. There was no applause, no dramatic swelling music. Just 5 men standing in the aftermath of something devastating, still bruised. Still bleeding, but maybe, just maybe, not defeated. For the first time, they weren't frozen. They were ready. And someone out there, whoever sent that transcript, was about to realize that trying to silence one of them meant waking all of them. The conference room was ice cold, both from the central air and the tension that had calcified the air between them. It was past midnight, but no one had moved. No one dared speak. A single LED light buzzed overhead. The walls were bare, save for a single framed photograph of BTS's debut stage, a moment that once meant everything, now framed in ironic silence. Yoongi tossed a USB stick onto the table. It skidded across the glossy surface before stopping near the legal department's side. That's the original recording, he said, voice calm, lethal. The one you swore didn't exist. Across from him, the HYBE director's jaw twitched. We have no knowledge of any unauthorized recordings. Then explain why it was sent anonymously to my inbox, Yoongi cut in, and why it's timestamped with your studio server's metadata. Namjoon leaned forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it vibrated with restrained fury. You didn't just breach trust. You broke Jimin. You violated every promise you made to us when we signed those contracts. You knew he was well, Jungkook added, finally speaking after watching the back and forth like a ticking bomb. And instead of helping him, you turned him into leverage. The room shifted. No one from the company said a word. Jimin sat at the end of the table. He hadn't spoken since walking in. Dressed in black, his eyes still rimmed red from everything he'd forced down, he looked more like a shadow than a person. I want a full statement, he said finally. Not a press release, a confession from your side. The PR director coughed. That would imply culpability. It would acknowledge the truth, Jimin said, locking eyes with him. Silence again. Yoongi stood. We're not asking. Taehyung placed his phone on the table and hit record. And we're not going to be silenced again. One of the HYBE executives, younger than the rest, cleared his throat. This could damage more than just your image. The group's stability, investor confidence. You thought about that before destroying our trust? Hosuk asked. You're not the only artists here, the executive said under his breath. Jimin's voice pierced through the room like thunder. I'm not just an artist, I'm a human being, and you tried to destroy me with my own vulnerability. He stood. And for the first time since this began, no one stopped him. When they exited the building, the air outside was heavy with mist. The city lights blurred in the moisture, and camera flashes were already lighting up behind tinted vans across the street. Do we go public? Namjoon asked quietly. Jimin didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Jungkook, who had stayed one step behind him the whole night. What happens if we do? They come for us, Jungkook said without hesitation. Again, Hosuk added. They paint us as ungrateful, delusional, broken, Taehyung said. Jimin smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Then maybe it's time they saw us for who we really are. The van ride was silent for a while, until Jungkook finally broke it. I need to tell you something, he said, voice cracking. Everyone turned toward him. Jungkook couldn't look at Jimin when he spoke. There's more footage. Jimin stared. What? They had cameras in the dorm, Jungkook said. Hidden, not company issued. I found one. Yoongi blinked. How long have you known? Since the fight, Jungkook whispered. I saw the lens inside the vent near the bathroom. I ripped it out. And you didn't say anything, Jimin asked, voice rising. I wanted to protect you, Jungkook said, but I didn't know how. I was scared it was deeper than we realized. Namjoon leaned forward. You still have it. Jungkook nodded, and the SD card inside. Taehyung swore under his breath. So they weren't just recording breakdowns, they were watching our lives. Who installed it? Yoongi asked, already thinking 10 steps ahead. I don't know, Jungkook admitted, but if there was one, there could be more. We need to check everything, Hoseok said. Every room, every studio, everything. That night they didn't go home. They went back to the dorm. The old dorm, the one they hadn't used in over a year. They arrived just after 2 a.m., the hallways abandoned, the power humming low. It was eerie, like walking into a memory that had been waiting for them to return. The key still worked. Inside, dust floated in the air like suspended time. The furniture was exactly as they had left it. The posters, the kitchen magnets, the half-used calendar still hanging by the fridge from a year ago. Taehyung went straight to the bedroom he and Jimin used to share. Jungkook peeled back the vent where he'd found the lens. There were 2 more. They worked in silence, every camera they uncovered burning deeper into their trust. By dawn they had found 5. 1 in the bathroom, 2 in the shared bedroom, 1 in the living room clock, and 1 inside the smoke detector. Jimin sat on the floor, his face unreadable. They watched us, he said, more to himself than anyone else. Not just in the studio, not just on set, here, in the one place we thought we were safe. No one spoke. Yoongi took pictures, documented everything. He was already thinking like a lawyer, a journalist, an archivist. Namjoon stood by the window, watching the sun rise over a city that had always seen them as gods. But now, they were just boys broken open. Jungkook sat beside Jimin. He didn't speak, just rested his hand palm up between them. Jimin stared at it for a long time. Then finally, slowly, his fingers touched Jungkook. And for the first time in days, neither of them looked away. You think if you say sorry enough times, it'll make this less disgusting. Jimin's voice wasn't loud, it was sharp, like the edge of something rusted, still capable of slicing deep. He stood in the center of the old dorm kitchen, the space suffocating under fluorescent light and unspoken truths. Jungkook was leaning against the counter, arms folded, his eyes red not from tears but exhaustion, the kind that guilt carves into the soul. I never said sorry because I thought it would fix it, Jungkook answered, voice low, steady. I said it because it's the only thing I can say without lying. That's convenient, Jimin snapped, stepping closer. Is that what you told yourself when you let them put a muzzle on you, that you were being honest by saying nothing? Jungkook didn't flinch. You weren't the only one they threatened, Jimin. I know that, Jimin shouted, and this time it echoed. The old microwave rattled. But I was the only one who ended up on the fucking floor while you were in a meeting room making deals behind my back. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Jimin growled, pointing at his chest. I gave everything to this group, my body, my voice, my sanity, and when I cracked, they didn't ask me if I needed help. They asked if I could keep quiet. Namjoon entered from the hallway, the faintest trace of unease in his stride. He said nothing at first, just leaned against the doorframe, observing. He'd heard everything. How could he not? You were right not to trust them, Namjoon finally said. Jimin turned toward him. Then why didn't you stop it? Namjoon closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the pain was sharp. Because I didn't know it was happening until it was too late. But you suspected, Jimin said. Namjoon didn't argue. God, you're all just as guilty, Jimin whispered, voice cracking. I was bleeding in front of you and you kept telling me to rest, to take a break, to write about it, like art could save me. We thought you needed space, Namjoon said quietly. Not surveillance, not blackmail. Taehyung stepped in then, holding a phone in his hand, the screen glowing with something he hadn't yet dared show. "Jimin, I think you need to hear this." "No," Jimin said, instantly defensive. "Not more footage, I'm done being watched." "It's not footage," Taehyung said. "It's a voice recording from the night before your collapse." Jimin narrowed his eyes. "Who recorded it?" "I did," Taehyung said. "Accidentally. I was recording something else and forgot to stop it. I didn't realize until today what it caught." Jimin hesitated. "It's them," Taehyung said. "The directors talking about you, about us, about what they planned." Jimin took the phone with trembling hands. He hit play. The room filled with the chilling, casual voices of HYBE executives. "He's fragile. It's going to happen eventually. Let it, it'll humanize the group. We can spin it. What about Jungkook? He won't go along with this." "He will. He always folds when the stakes are high. And if Jimin actually breaks, then we'll film the comeback story." Silence. Jimin stopped the recording and stared at the floor. "That's what we were to them?" he asked. "A storyline?" "Yes," Jungkook said softly. Jimin laughed, a broken, hopeless sound. "And I thought we were a family." "They never saw us as people," Yoongi said from the hallway, joining them. "Just investments, some higher yield than others." Jimin turned toward Jungkook again. "You were in meetings with these people." "Not like that," Jungkook said. "I thought I was negotiating. I didn't realize I was being played too." Jimin's fists clenched at his sides. "And you stayed silent because you thought if I fell apart quietly, they'd let you stay standing." Jungkook's voice broke. "I stayed silent because I thought if I fell apart with you, we'd both be lost." Jimin took a slow step forward. "Then let me ask you this," he said, staring straight into Jungkook's soul. "When I was laying in that ambulance unconscious, did you feel safe?" Jungkook closed his eyes. "No." "Then maybe we both got lost," Jimin said. Hoseok sat on the floor. He looked older than ever. "What do we do now? We expose them, yes, but what next? Lawsuits, press, fan backlash, you know they'll flip it." Yoongi nodded. "They'll paint us as unstable, disloyal. The golden boys turned rebels. The media's ready to feast." Namjoon exhaled. "We control the narrative. We tell the story before they can." "With what?" Taehyung asked. "A Twitter thread, a press conference. Who even believes idols when they cry out?" Jimin raised his head. "Then we stop being idols." The room stilled. Namjoon frowned. "What are you saying?" Jimin took a breath. "I mean, maybe it's time we stop playing the part they wrote for us. Stop waiting to be allowed to speak. Stop being the brand. Start being real." Jungkook stared. "You want to end BTS?" "No," Jimin said. "I want to save BTS." "And how do we do that?" Hoseok asked. "By risking everything," Jimin said, "even the name." They stared at him like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. But then, one by one, they stepped forward closer to the edge, closer to him. Taehyung was the first to nod. "I'm in," he said. Hoseok stood. "Me too." Yoongi folded his arms. "I've been ready." Namjoon hesitated. "If we do this, we can't go back." Jimin looked at him. "Good." Finally, Jungkook. He looked at Jimin for a long time. Then slowly, he reached into his pocket and took out the SD card with the footage he had found. He placed it in Jimin's hand. "For you to decide," he said. And in that moment something shifted. Not peace, not forgiveness, but a crack in the wall. And through it, truth. The upload was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. sharp. A single post, black background, white text, no logo, no filters. "Silence has been our cage. This is the beginning of our voice." No one knew whose idea it was to phrase it like that, but when Jimin read it aloud, the room went quiet. It was like standing at the edge of a war not yet declared. The kind where the first shot isn't fired with bullets but with truth, and the whole world watches with fingers hovering over their screens. Jungkook sat on the windowsill, one leg dangling, staring out at Seoul's skyline like it was foreign territory. Taehyung paced like a caged lion. Yoongi leaned against the wall near the hallway, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Namjoon sat at the table, expression unreadable, fingers interlaced in front of him like he was trying to keep himself from unraveling. Hoseok hadn't spoken in an hour. Jimin's phone buzzed. HYBE. Again. No one told him to ignore it. They didn't need to. That decision had already been made hours ago when they unearthed the last SD card behind the baseboard of the old dorm bedroom. The contents had stunned even Yoongi, who thought he'd seen every kind of betrayal imaginable from the corporate world. It wasn't just footage. It was strategy meetings, planning sessions, script, dialogues between HYBE executives and marketing consultants laying out potential narrative arcs for each member, highlighting breakdowns, speculating on burnout timelines, betting on who would collapse first and how it could be spun into a redemption arc. Jungkook was marked most emotionally compliant. Jimin was marked most likely to crack. Under Namjoon's name it read, "Voice of Reason, will eventually break if isolated from others." Hoseok, fan favorite, utilize in high-energy content to distract from inner-group tension. Yoongi, minimal exposure, manipulate with artistic control. Taehyung, volatile, keep under control by exploiting loyalty to Jimin. It was all there, in black and white. None of it was conjecture anymore. Jimin dropped the phone onto the couch. They built our collapse like it was a comeback trailer. Jungkook stood, "We burn them tonight." Namjoon hesitated, "Are we sure?" "No," Yoongi said, "but we're done being unsure." Hoseok exhaled sharply and stood. "We have to talk, all of us." "What do you think we've been doing?" Jungkook asked, frustrated. "No," Hoseok said. "I mean really talk, all of it, no more holding back." There was a silence, then a nod, and another, until all seven were sitting, this time not as idols, not as global sensations, but as seven men who had built something historic and were now watching it rot from within. Hoseok looked at Jimin. "What happened between you and the director?" Everyone froze. Jimin's fingers curled around the edge of the cushion. "Which one?" "You know which," Hoseok said. "The one who left 2 years ago, the one who disappeared right after you took your hiatus." Jimin didn't respond at first, but then his eyes lifted, not defensive, not angry, just tired. "He cornered me in the vocal booth," Jimin said. "Said I was slipping, that I needed to shake things up if I wanted to stay relevant." "What does that mean?" Taehyung asked, his voice low. "He asked me to fake a breakdown," Jimin said. "Said it would generate sympathy. Said it worked for Western artists. He wanted me to cry in a live stream, break down on camera, then disappear for a month, come back with a new tattoo, a new hair color, and a new single written about survival." "You never told us," Jungkook whispered. "Because I didn't want to believe it," Jimin said. "Because I thought maybe I'd misunderstood, that maybe I was spiraling and reading too much into things. But the next day I found a script on my desk." "What script?" Yoongi asked. Jimin pulled out his phone and tapped a file. It was titled, "Jimin's Redemption Arc, Phase 1. Jungkook walked over and stared at the screen. Dates, angles, press strategies, a choreographed comeback. "Why didn't you tell me?" Taehyung asked, his voice shaking. Jimin finally looked at him. "Because I knew you'd kill someone." Taehyung's hands balled into fists. "That's not an excuse." "No," Jimin said, "but it was the only thing I could control." Namjoon stood. "That's it, we go live tonight." "Not just a statement," Jungkook said. "A live stream, real-time us, no edits." "Full confrontation," Yoongi added, "on our terms." "What about legal?" Hoseok asked. "We've got the SD cards," Namjoon said. "We've got the logs. We have enough to blow a hole in their fortress. Taehyung pulled out his phone and opened the BTS shared account. One button. Jimin stared at the screen. Once we do this, we're not BTS anymore. No, Jungkook said, we're something more. The countdown began. 3 minutes until the world would hear the truth, not through a polished press release or corporate filtered statement, but from the raw, uncut voices of the 7 men who built an empire and watched it get twisted into a prison. As they sat side by side on the floor, facing the same screen where millions would soon be watching, Jimin reached over and took Jungkook's hand. No one said anything about it. Because this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about freedom. And it was already happening. The livestream timer hit 0. And for the first time in their decade-long history, the silence between the 7 of them wasn't orchestrated. It was real. It was suffocating. And it was being watched by more than 17 million people just within the first 15 seconds. They didn't start with music. They didn't start with a smile. It was Jimin, eyes dark, hoodie pulled low, voice rough from nights of shouting and no sleep. We're not okay. That's all he said. And the screen exploded. Thousands of comments per second, purple hearts, shocked emojis, wild theories, denial, confusion, support, attacks, chaos. The internet was already boiling, but none of them were looking at the live chat because this wasn't for them. This was for each other. For years, we've been told to smile through it, Jimin continued. Even when we were falling apart, even when we hated each other, even when we hated ourselves. Jungkook leaned forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it was thunder in the room. What you've seen isn't everything. What you weren't allowed to see is what almost destroyed us. Yoongi clicked open the file directory on the laptop and shared his screen to the live stream. Every file in here, he said, was collected in secret. Audio, video, transcripts, all of it done without our knowledge. All of it used to create a narrative that wasn't ours. Taehyung sat back in his chair, chewing the inside of his cheek like he didn't trust himself to speak. Hoseok kept tapping his knee. Namjoon was staring at the camera like it was a courtroom, and he was finally being allowed to testify after years of being told to stay silent. This is more than a contract dispute, Namjoon said. This is about identity, about being controlled, about mental health being weaponized to sell records. Jimin looked directly into the lens. His voice shook. They said I was weak, so they planned my fall, but I got back up. And now I'm telling you everything you thought you knew about us. It was a lie they wrote for us. Jungkook turned to Jimin suddenly, a sharpness in his tone. Then say it, say everything. Jimin blinked. Don't hold back now, Jungkook pushed. Say what you've wanted to say to me, to us. Don't protect anyone anymore. Jimin inhaled. You want it all. I want the truth, Jungkook said. So Jimin stood. And everything exploded. You let me collapse on that stage, he said to Jungkook, his voice full of fire. You heard me begging you before rehearsals to pull the song. I wasn't ready. I couldn't breathe. I said I didn't feel right, but you said it's just nerves. You said you've done this 100 times. Jungkook stood too. Because I thought if I bobbied you it would make it worse. Because we needed you out there, Jimin. No, Jimin said. You needed the image of me, not me. Not the version of me who cried in the shower at 4 a.m., not the version who couldn't eat for 3 days because my stomach was too tight with panic. You think you're the only one, Jungkook snapped. You think I didn't lie awake every night wondering if I could even breathe without a camera in my face. You think I didn't watch myself disappear under the pressure of being golden. That's not what I said, Jimin growled. No, but it's what you meant. Yoongi finally slammed his hand on the table. Enough. The room went still. He stood slow, calm, but terrifying. You want the world to hear it, he said. Then all of it comes out. Taehyung stood next. I'll start. Everyone looked at him. Taehyung's mouth trembled. I was the one who leaked that we were breaking down in 2022. Silence. What? Hosuk said quietly. I was scared, Taehyung said. I thought, if someone knew, they'd help us. I thought exposing the cracks would make them stop pushing us, but it only made them squeeze tighter. Jimin stared. You leaked to dispatch. Taehyung nodded. I used a burner, gave them enough to bait a scandal but not enough to prove anything. Namjoon's face was unreadable. You didn't trust us. I didn't trust them, Taehyung said, and I thought maybe if I burned the edges of the house, they'd stop setting the rest on fire. Yoongi walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder. We've all done things we're not proud of. No, Taehyung said, there's more. He looked at Jimin. I knew about the cameras, 6 months before Jungkook found his. Jimin's mouth parted, stunned. You what? I found one in the makeup mirror at the studio dorm, Taehyung said. I ripped it out and hid it. I didn't say anything because I thought, maybe it was for safety, maybe it was management being overprotective. But then I started noticing. Every time one of us cracked, they had content ready within hours. Yoongi rubbed his face. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, Taehyung said to Jimin. I should have told you. Jimin didn't speak. He just sat down slowly. Namjoon stepped forward. I have something too. Everyone turned. I signed a renewal with HYBE last year, Namjoon said. I didn't tell you guys. I was scared of what would happen if none of us did. You what? Hosuk said, shocked. I didn't take money, Namjoon said, but I signed creative control clauses. I thought, if I had a foot in the door, I could protect you. I thought being inside the system was better than being outside with a Molotov. Jungkook laughed bitterly. So we've all been lying to each other. No, Namjoon said, we've all been surviving. Jimin looked up, voice soft. Then maybe it's time we start living instead. The live stream was still going. Viewers were climbing past 20 million. They had just watched BTS fall apart. And now, somehow, they were watching them stitch the bleeding open wound, not with polished PR, but with everything they were never allowed to show. Not strength, but honesty. Not unity, but vulnerability. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the world needed to see. There was a kind of quiet that only came after chaos. Not peace, not relief, just that heavy, suffocating silence that filled a room like smoke after the fire had already consumed everything worth saving. The live stream had ended only 40 minutes ago, but it felt like a lifetime. The apartment was dim now. The screens were dark. 7 phones buzzed simultaneously like angry insects. Calls, notifications, texts, press emails, legal threats, trending hashtags. BTS exposes HYBE was #1 worldwide. Free BTS was climbing fast, but the room remained still. Namjoon sat with his elbows on his knees, head hanging low like gravity had finally won. Hosuk had disappeared into the bathroom 20 minutes ago and hadn't come out. Yoongi stood at the counter, staring at nothing, replaying every word they'd said on that live stream. Taehyung sat on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, eyes glassy but dry. Jungkook stood by the open window. He was still sweating, not from heat, but from adrenaline, guilt, and something else he couldn't name. His hair stuck to the back of his neck. He hadn't blinked much since the live stream ended. He just kept staring into the dark skyline, searching for signs of collapse. Jimin hadn't moved since the last sentence he spoke. His hoodie was still pulled low, his shoulders hunched. His fingers gripped the phone so tightly they'd gone white. When he finally looked up, his voice was the first to break the unbearable silence. What did we just do? Yoongi didn't look away from the counter. We told the truth. Yeah, Jimin whispered, his voice tight. But did we just burn everything we ever built? Namjoon stood. No, we burned the lies. Jungkook turned, and the stage with it. Let it burn, Yoongi said. Suddenly, Hosak emerged from the hallway, pale, holding his phone like it had exploded in his hand. Someone's here. Everyone tensed. What do you mean? Namjoon asked. Downstairs, Hosak said. Security called, he's outside, says he needs to speak to us. Who? Jungkook asked. Bang Si-hyuk. The name fell like a thunderclap. For a moment no one moved. The same man who discovered them, built the empire around them, betrayed them, and now somehow had the audacity to show up in person after everything they exposed. He wants to talk, Jimin said, his voice already rising. Now after this. He didn't sound angry, Hosak said. He sounded desperate. Yoongi turned, let him up. What? Jungkook snapped. You want to let him into this room? He's coming whether we like it or not, Yoongi said. Might as well be on our terms. Taehyung stood. This is a trap. No, Namjoon said. This is the reckoning. 30 minutes later, the front door opened slowly. Bang Si-hyuk stepped in without bodyguards, without a manager, without even a mask. He looked like he hadn't slept. His blazer was wrinkled. His eyes were sunken. But still, he walked into the lion's den without hesitation. They all stared at him. Close the door, Jimin said. You wanted this, you got it. Bang closed the door and faced them. I watched the live stream, he said, all of it. Good, Namjoon said coldly. Now you get to face what you created. There was no formality, no introductions, no small talk. Just 7 boys who were once boys, now men with fire in their veins, standing in front of the man who once promised them the world. You lied to us, Jimin said. I know, Bang said. You used us, Yoongi added. I know. You filmed us, Taehyung said, venom in every word. I didn't authorize the cameras, Bang said, but I didn't stop them either. Jungkook stepped forward. You watched us fall apart and said nothing. Bang finally looked him in the eye, because I thought you needed to. That broke the room. You're insane, Jimin spat. You think suffering is branding, Jungkook shouted. I thought you needed to break to find your edge, Bang said, voice shaking. That's what the industry told me. That's what the board said. That the world didn't want perfection. It wanted blood. So you bled us dry, Namjoon said, fists clenched. I told myself it was art, Bang continued, but I was wrong. No, Jimin said, you were cowardly. Bang didn't deny it. I came here tonight not to fight, he said, but to say something I should have said a long time ago. Unless it's a confession, save it, Yoongi said. I'm stepping down, Bang said quietly. That stopped everything. I already filed the resignation with the board, he added, effective immediately. Jungkook blinked. You're serious? Bang nodded. I betrayed the only thing I ever built that mattered, and I won't hide behind press releases or lawyers. Jimin looked him up and down. Then why come here? Bang's voice trembled. Because I didn't want to leave without facing you, without saying this to your face. He turned to Jimin. I failed you. Then to Jungkook. I failed all of you. He took a breath, and I'm sorry. No one responded. Because what do you say to the man who helped shape your dreams and nightmares? Bang took a step back. You don't have to forgive me, you shouldn't, but I hope. Someday you'll understand that I believed I was doing what was best, even when it was. He turned toward the door. Goodbye. No one moved as he left. The door closed softly behind him. And for a while no one spoke. Then Jungkook whispered, that didn't feel like a win. It wasn't, Jimin said. Taehyung exhaled, but it's a start. Yoongi nodded. Now it's our turn to rebuild. From what? Hosak asked. Ashes. Jimin looked around the room, at the people who had seen him at his worst, at the stage that nearly killed him, at the group that still hadn't said the words they needed to hear. From the truth, he said. And for the first time in a long, long time, They believed him. The door had been shut for nearly 10 minutes, but his presence still hung in the room like fog that wouldn't lift. No one moved. They sat or stood frozen, like the weight of what just happened had sucked the air out of the building. Bang Si-hyuk was gone, really gone, but his legacy was. Not when it lived in their traumas. Jimin finally moved first. He stood slowly, hoodie sleeves pulled over his hands, face unreadable. He walked past the others without looking at them, went straight to the kitchen sink, turned on the tap, and let cold water run over his wrists. Jungkook watched him from across the room, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. He wanted to say something, anything, but his mind was a battlefield and every word was a landmine. The silence between them was heavier now than it had been even in the hospital. Yoongi exhaled. We need to talk about what comes next. No, Jimin said quietly without turning off the water. Not yet. Taehyung looked up. Jimin. Jimin turned around slowly. His eyes were glassy, not from tears, from fury. Don't you all dare sit there like this is over. Namjoon straightened in his chair. We don't think it's over. Then why the hell does it feel like everyone's relieved? Jimin snapped. Jungkook stepped forward. Because he stepped down, that matters. Jimin scoffed. You think resignation erases what he did, the footage, the manipulation, the collapse we all lived through. He acknowledged it, Jungkook started. Acknowledgement is a performance, Jimin cut in. Action is truth. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. He gave us the company, Jimin. Did he? Jimin asked, stepping toward him. Or did he hand us a burning ship so we'd be blamed when it finally sinks? No one had an answer. Jimin turned back to the sink. The cold water kept flowing. Taehyung stood. Then what do you want, Jimin? Jimin didn't hesitate. Full exposure. No NDAs, no damage control, no half-truths. I want everything out, even if it kills us. You don't mean that, Jungkook said. Jimin looked at him. Don't I? Yoongi rubbed his eyes. You're asking for war. We're already in one, Jimin said. You just didn't want to admit it because it meant turning on the very system that gave us everything. Namjoon spoke carefully. It's not about denial, it's about preservation. Preservation of what? Jimin asked. The group, the music, the fans, or your image as the leader who held it all together? Namjoon went stiff. Watch what you're implying. Jimin stepped closer. No, let's say it out loud. You've been managing us like we're your burden, not your brothers. Jimin, Hoseok warned. No, Jimin snapped. You all told me to rest when I was dying. You called it support when really, it was you not knowing how to deal with me unraveling in front of you. You think that's fair? Namjoon stood now too. I held all your secrets. I defended you in meetings that could have ended your contract. I buried my own breakdown so yours wouldn't look like weakness. You didn't bury them, Jimin hissed. You just broadcasted them better. Taehyung stepped between them. Stop this. But it was too late. Jungkook exploded. You think you're the only one who suffered, Jimin. I watched the person I trusted most stop trusting me. You looked at me like I was a stranger after the fight, and maybe I deserved it, but you never once let me explain. You just decided I failed you. Because you did, Jimin shouted back. You were supposed to be the one person who didn't need an explanation to stand beside me. I was trying to protect you, Jungkook yelled. Then why did I feel more alone with you in the room than I did unconscious in that ambulance? Silence again. But this one was colder. Hoseok sat down, his hand over his mouth. Taehyung couldn't look at anyone. Namjoon lowered his head. We're not ready for this conversation. No, Yoongi said quietly. We're exactly where we need to be, bleeding, honest, ugly. Jimin laughed bitterly. Then let's get uglier. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. Go on. Jimin looked at him. When we were in LA, I was approached by someone from a different label. They offered me a solo contract. No restrictions, total creative freedom. seven-figure up front. Jungkook's face drained of color. When? Jimin looked directly at him, 3 weeks before the fight. And you didn't tell us, Taehyung asked. Would it have mattered? Jimin said. You weren't listening to me anyway. Did you accept it? Namjoon asked, voice hollow. Jimin shook his head. No, I said I couldn't leave, not without at least trying to be heard here. Why tell us now? Jungkook asked. Jimin looked around the room at the fragments of what they used to be, because if we don't confront all the near betrayals, the ones that almost happened, they'll rot into real ones. Namjoon sank into the couch, burying his face in his hands. I can't do this much longer, he admitted. Not like this, not with all of us still carrying knives behind our backs. Yoongi leaned forward. Then we need a reckoning, not just with the company, with us. What do you mean? Hoseok asked. I mean a room, Yoongi said. One camera, no script, just the 7 of us airing everything we've buried, and we let the world see it. Taehyung frowned, like a documentary. No, Yoongi said, like confession, one that no label could have ever written for us. Jimin nodded, I'm in. Jungkook stared at the floor, then finally said, me too. Namjoon hesitated. Then whispered, yeah. Hoseok sighed, let's finish what we started. And in that moment, broken and bloodied as they were, they finally agreed on one thing. The only way to survive was to burn every lie to ash, even if it meant they never rose from it again. The lights weren't studio quality, the room wasn't staged. The camera was a single DSLR mounted on a tripod in the middle of Namjoon's living room, and none of them wore makeup. No stylists, no media team, no HYBE representatives breathing down their necks. Just 7 chairs in a crooked semicircle, one mic clipped to a foldable table, and the truth waiting like a bomb in the middle of the room. Jimin adjusted his chair. Are we doing this or not? He said. Yoongi nodded and hit record. This is not a documentary, Namjoon began, staring into the camera lens. This is a reckoning. If you're here to defend a brand, a bias, or a fantasy, this might not be the space for you. We're not idols in this room. We're people, and we're going to talk like people. Jungkook exhaled sharply and leaned forward. We were trained not to talk like this, not in public, not in private. Hell, sometimes not even in our own heads. Taehyung shifted, so we faked it for years. Hoseok laughed bitterly. You know how many times we said family in interviews? I stopped counting after 200. Namjoon turned. Let's start with what we never said to each other. The silence was instant. Then Yoongi looked at Jungkook. You let me believe I was crazy for being paranoid about the staff. Remember when I told you someone was copying my song Demos and pitching them before I finished them? You said it was in my head. Jungkook's face tightened. Because I didn't want it to be true. If it was, then everything we were in was poison. It was poison, Yoongi said flatly, and you watched me drink it. Jimin broke in. You think you're the only one who felt abandoned. Everyone in this room has chosen silence over each other at least once. I chose silence over survival, Jungkook snapped. There's a difference. No, Jimin shot back. You chose compliance and called it care. Taehyung turned to Jimin. And you chose self-destruction and called it art. Jimin looked at him, jaw clenched. You want to go there? I'm already there, Taehyung said, shaking. You weaponized your pain, Jimin, against us. You knew we were scared for you, and you used that fear to make us feel guilty instead of supported. I didn't ask for your fear, Jimin screamed. I asked for your presence, and you kept running, into rehearsals, into solos, into tour, anywhere but next to me. Hoseok wiped his face. This is insane. We're eating each other alive. Namjoon finally raised his voice. Then let's finish the feast. Let's name it all. He stood. I'll go first, he said, his voice shaking. I was glad when Jimin collapsed. Every head snapped toward him. Not because I wanted him hurt, Namjoon continued, but because I needed something to finally break so I could stop pretending I could hold all of you together. Jungkook stood. You could have told us that. And risk losing everything, Namjoon said. I didn't know how to lead you. I only knew how to carry you, and I resented every second of it. Jimin's face fell. Taehyung was next. I slept in my car 3 nights during the 2021 tour. I didn't tell anyone. I said it was for space. It was because I couldn't handle the silence between us anymore. Yoongi nodded. I walked off stage in 2020 because I saw someone in the crew laugh when Jimin missed his cue. You all thought I was being emotional. I was being done. Hoseok leaned forward. I started seeing a therapist last year. You want to know what I told her? That I don't know who I am if I'm not smiling. Everyone went quiet again. Then finally Jungkook. I considered leaving. Jimin looked up. Not just the group, Jungkook said. Life. Taehyung's breath hitched. When? During the Japan leg, Jungkook whispered. I had the pills in my bag. I even wrote the note. I didn't want to be the disappointment anymore. The one everyone projected onto. The one who had to be golden while feeling like rotting metal inside. Jimin got up. Walked over. Sat beside him. I never knew, he whispered. I didn't want you to, Jungkook said. Yoongi finally turned off the camera. We have enough, he said. But no one moved. Because for the first time in years, they weren't performing. They weren't even healing. They were revealing. And that was the most terrifying, honest thing they had ever done. Morning arrived without permission. Sunlight crept through the thin curtains, pale and almost cruel, illuminating a room that looked like the aftermath of a storm. Empty water bottles, crumpled tissues, chairs left askew where bodies had stood, shouted, collapsed, confessed. The camera still sat on its tripod, silent now, like a witness that had finally been dismissed. No one had slept. Jimin was the first to move. He stood by the window, arms wrapped around himself, staring at the city as if seeing it for the first time. Not as a stage, not as a battlefield, just a place where people lived their lives without microphones hidden in ceilings. Behind him, Jungkook sat on the floor, back against the couch, eyes red and unfocused. He hadn't moved since Yoongi turned off the camera hours earlier. His body felt hollow, like everything that had been keeping him upright had finally poured out. The silence was different now. Not tense. Not explosive. Just heavy. Jimin turned around slowly. If we walk away after this, he said, voice quiet but steady, the world will decide what this was, a breakdown, a scandal, a tragedy. Namjoon lifted his head. And if we do? Then we decide, Jimin said. Taehyung rubbed his face, exhaustion etched into every line. Decide what? Jimin met each of their eyes, one by one. Who we are without fear. Hoseok laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. That sounds nice, but you know they won't let us disappear quietly. They don't have to, Yoongi said. We're not disappearing. Jungkook finally spoke, his voice rough. I don't want to be frozen anymore. Everyone looked at him. I've lived my whole life reacting, Jungkook continued. To expectations, to fear, to pressure, to guilt. I stood still while everything burned because I thought movement would make it worse. He swallowed. I don't want to do that again, not with you, not with myself. Jimin walked toward him and sat on the floor too, close enough that their shoulders touched. Then don't. Namjoon stood slowly, like his body weighed more than it used to. We can't pretend this didn't fracture us. It did, but fractures don't always mean collapse. Sometimes they show where the structure was wrong. Taehyung nodded. We've been performing unity instead of practicing it. And punishing each other for not surviving the same way, Hoseok added. Yoongi leaned forward, elbows on his knees. So here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. BTS as we knew it is over. No one argued. The words hurt, but they didn't shock. That doesn't mean we're done, Yoongi continued. It means we stop forcing ourselves into a shape that almost killed us. Jimin exhaled deeply. No contracts, no deadlines, no narratives written by people who profit from our pain. And no silence, Jungkook said. Namjoon looked at him. Are you sure you're ready for that? Jungkook nodded. I'm terrified, which is how I know it's real. The phone started buzzing again. News alerts, statements, speculation, offers, threats, but no one reached for them. Not yet. Taehyung stood and walked to the camera. He unplugged it and set it down gently like laying something to rest. That footage stays with us, not for content, not for proof, for memory. Hoseok smiled faintly. For once, something that's just ours. Jimin closed his eyes. I thought anger was the only thing keeping me alive. Turns out it was honesty. He looked at Jungkook. I was angry because you froze, but I was angrier because I needed you and didn't know how to ask without feeling weak. Jungkook's voice broke. I froze because I thought if I moved wrong, I'd lose you. They looked at each other. No shouting now, no accusations. Just two people finally seeing the fear beneath the damage. I'm still here, Jimin said. So am I, Jungkook replied. Namjoon cleared his throat. Then this is what we do. We release a final statement, not a defense, not a confession, a boundary. Yoongi nodded. We say we're stepping back on our terms. And we mean it, Hoseok added. No hidden deals, no secret pressure. Taehyung stretched, exhaustion finally catching up to him. We'll lose things. Jimin smiled softly. We already lost what mattered most once. I don't plan on doing that again. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, the city waking up without them performing for it. For the first time in years, there was no schedule waiting to swallow them whole. Just choice. Jungkook stood and opened the window wider. Cool air rushed in, carrying the sounds of traffic, voices, ordinary life. He breathed deeply, like someone learning how again. I don't know what will be next, he said. Jimin stood beside him. We don't have to. Namjoon nodded. We just have to be real. Yoongi picked up his phone at last and typed slowly, deliberately. When he finished, he read it aloud. We are stepping away from the stage to protect the people behind the names. This is not an ending. This is a correction. No one suggested changing a word. Outside, the world kept spinning. Inside, something finally settled. They didn't hug dramatically, didn't cry for the cameras, didn't promise forever. They simply stayed. Together. And for the first time since the fight, since the hospital, since the years of silence. No one was frozen anymore.